I always thought a father could read his daughter's heart just by looking at her eyes, but that night, at her wedding, I realized how wrong I was. The hall was glowing with golden lights. Soft music played while people laughed, clapped, and took pictures of Olivia and her new husband, Ethan. Everyone kept saying, "They look perfect together." I forced a smile, pretending to believe them. I wanted to be happy. I truly did. When it was time for the father-daughter dance, Olivia walked toward me slowly, holding her wedding dress with shaky fingers. Her smile looked bright, but something in her eyes didn't match it. Her eyes looked tired, almost scared, but before I could ask anything, she placed her hands on my shoulders, and the music started. We moved in slow circles. It should have been a peaceful moment, a moment a father remembers forever. But then Olivia leaned closer, close enough that only I could hear her whisper, "Dad, don't react." Her voice didn't sound like her own. It sounded small, broken. I felt her hand slip into my jacket pocket. It was a tiny movement, but her fingers trembled so hard that even I felt it. She pulled away immediately and smiled again, wider than before, pretending nothing happened. My heart started beating faster. What did she just give me? I kept my hand still, too scared to check. I didn't want to break her act. I didn't want anyone watching us to know something was wrong. But someone was watching. Across the room, Ethan stood with a glass of champagne, smiling politely at guests. But his eyes were locked on Olivia, following every one of her movements, every breath she took. Something cold moved through my chest when I saw him. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His expression didn't look like a husband admiring his new wife. It looked like someone guarding his property. Beside him stood Cole, his assistant, holding a small notebook. Strange. Why would anyone take notes at a wedding? But Cole wasn't writing anything. He was watching Olivia too closely. I placed my hand in my pocket and felt the envelope. It was thin, almost weightless, but it felt heavier than anything I had ever held. When the music ended, Olivia stepped back, and for a second she looked straight at me. Her smile didn't match the fear in her eyes. I walked to a quiet corner behind a tall flower arrangement and opened the envelope carefully. Inside was only one small piece of paper, a single line, written quickly, letters slightly shaky. "Dad, help me." My whole body froze. The lights, the music, the laughing guests, everything around me felt far away, like I was suddenly underwater. I looked up at Olivia again. She was standing beside Ethan now. He placed his hand on her waist. She flinched, just a little, but enough for me to see. And in that moment, I understood something I never imagined. My daughter was not safe. And this wedding was not the beginning of her happy life. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Long before the wedding night, before the lights, before the smiles, there were signs. Small signs, quiet signs. Signs I didn't take seriously until that note. It started months earlier. Olivia used to visit my house every weekend. We cooked together, talked about work, watched old movies. But after she met Ethan, the visits slowly decreased. At first, she said she was busy. Then she said she was tired. Later, she stopped giving reasons at all. One afternoon, she came over for a short visit. She wore a long-sleeved shirt even though the weather was hot. When she lifted her arm to tie her hair, the sleeve slid down for half a second. I saw something dark on her wrist, a faded bruise. When our eyes met, she quickly pulled the sleeve back down and laughed too loudly, trying to cover it. "Dad, don't look at me like that. I'm fine." But her voice cracked at the end. Back then, I tried to believe her. I blamed the bruise on stress, work, anything else. I didn't want to think of the darker possibilities. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, Ethan was polite, confident, and charming when he first came to my house. But even on that first meeting, something felt off. He walked around my living room with too much interest, like he was inspecting it. He touched the books on my shelf, straightened a picture frame, and asked questions that didn't sound like normal conversation. What time does Olivia usually come home from here? Does she share personal things with you often? Do her friends visit her when she's here? He smiled while asking, but his eyes stayed cold. Olivia laughed nervously and kept interrupting him. Ethan, stop. Dad doesn't care about all that. He shrugged, still smiling. But the questions didn't feel like curiosity. They felt like ownership. Still, I kept quiet. Weeks passed, and Olivia became harder to reach. She stopped answering messages quickly. Sometimes, she didn't reply at all. When she did, her replies were short. It didn't sound like her. She sounded edited. Then came the night she visited, without telling Ethan. She arrived late, around 9 p.m., holding a small bag. She looked tired. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Dad, can I stay for a bit?" she whispered. "Of course," I said. But before she even sat down, her phone rang. The screen flashed with Ethan's name. She froze. The color left her face. She didn't answer. The phone rang again. This time, she picked up. I didn't hear Ethan's voice, but I heard Olivia's tone. Soft, careful, apologetic. "I'm sorry. I'm on my way. No, I didn't go anywhere else. I'll be home soon. I promise." When she hung up, she didn't say a word. She walked to the door, wiped her eyes, and whispered, "Dad, don't worry about me." But I did. From that night on, I watched her slowly drift further away. Until the wedding. Until that note. And now, every forgotten sign from the past rose in my mind like smoke. Because nothing about her life with Ethan had ever been normal. Nothing had ever been safe. The first time I stepped inside Olivia and Ethan's mansion, something inside me tightened. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a quiet warning in my chest, the kind that tells you something is wrong even when everything looks perfect. The house was huge and shining, floors clean enough to see your reflection, expensive paintings on the walls, fresh flowers arranged in tall glass vases. But even with all that beauty, the air felt heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. Olivia greeted me at the door with a smile, too bright, too practiced. "Dad, you made it." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes moved fast, checking behind me, checking the hallway, checking who might be listening. Before I could answer, Cole appeared from the corner like a shadow. He didn't smile. He didn't greet me. He only said, "Mr. Ethan will see you in the living room." Not welcome, not hello, just instructions. I followed Olivia inside, and as we walked down the hallway, I noticed something strange. There were small black circles tucked into the corners of the ceiling. Cameras. Not just one or two. They were everywhere, every corner, every hallway, every room I could see from the doorway. "Security," Olivia said quickly, before I even asked. But her voice sounded tight, as if she had repeated that excuse too many times. We entered the living room. Ethan sat on a white sofa, legs crossed, smiling like always. But the smile didn't move his eyebrows. His eyes stayed flat. "Mr. Harris," he said, "I'm glad you could visit. Please understand, we keep things very orderly here." Orderly. That word felt like a warning. He stood up and pointed to a list posted near the door. A list printed in bold letters. Rules of the house. 1. No locked doors. 2. No leaving the house without permission. 3. No private conversations without informing Ethan. 4. All phones must remain in the open area at night. 5. All visitors must be approved. My stomach twisted. Why would a couple need rules like that? Olivia tried to grab the list and hide it, but Ethan stopped her. He didn't touch her, he didn't have to. One sharp look made her step back instantly. Olivia respects the structure, Ethan said calmly. It keeps everything smooth. Olivia stood beside him, hands clasped, shoulders tense. I could see she was choosing every breath carefully. Later, when Ethan left the room to take a call, I finally whispered, "Olivia, are you okay?" She shook her head quickly. "Dad, don't ask. Not here." "Why not?" She glanced up at a tiny camera in the corner. "Because nothing in this house is private." Before I could say another word, Mrs. Gray, Ethan's aunt, appeared behind us. I hadn't heard her footsteps. She moved silently, her face calm but unreadable. "Olivia," Mrs. Gray said softly. "Ethan doesn't like secrets." Olivia lowered her eyes immediately. I watched her shrink into herself, like a candle burning down to its last bit of wax. And for the first time, I understood something chilling. My daughter wasn't living in a home. She was living inside someone else's rules, someone else's control, someone else's fear. After visiting the mansion, I couldn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's face, smiling on the outside, shaking on the inside. I kept hearing her voice, "Dad, not here, nothing is private." That sentence stayed with me like a shadow. I decided to learn more about Ethan on my own, not as a father, not as a guest, but as someone who needed to understand what danger his daughter was living in. I started by searching his interviews. He looked friendly on camera, but something felt rehearsed. Every answer sounded memorized. He kept saying the same thing: "I value order. I believe in discipline. I don't like surprises." The more I watched, the more I saw the same coldness I had seen in person. People admired him, but admiration can hide truth. Next, I looked up his company. There were rumors, unproven, quiet, mostly whispered online. Things about workers who suddenly quit, people who said Ethan controlled every detail and fired anyone who questioned him. Nothing official, nothing dangerous enough to prove anything, but enough to make me uneasy. While I researched him, Olivia grew harder to reach. She rarely answered calls. When she did pick up, the sound of fear in her voice was impossible to miss. Once, I heard a door close behind her. She gasped softly and whispered, "Dad, I can't talk. Please don't call too much. It makes things worse." Worse? For who? That question burned in my chest. A week later, I went to the mansion without warning. I didn't care about Ethan's rules. I needed to see my daughter. When I arrived, a housekeeper opened the door. She looked nervous, eyes wide, shoulders stiff. "Is Olivia here?" I asked. She looked over her shoulder before she answered. "She is in the garden." Her voice trembled as if she wasn't supposed to tell me. I walked through the house quietly, past the cameras, past the silence, until I reached the back door that led to the garden. There she was, sitting alone on a bench, hands covering her face. She wasn't crying loudly. She was crying the way people cry when they have cried too many times. Tired, slow, almost empty. "Olivia," I whispered. She looked up, startled, and quickly wiped her face. "Dad, you shouldn't be here." I sat beside her. "Tell me what's happening." She shook her head, looking toward the house. "I can't." "You're not safe," I said softly. "I can see it. Just tell me what you need." She took a shaky breath. "Dad, if I talk, everything will get worse. You don't understand." He hears things. He knows things. She stopped. The back door opened. Ethan stepped outside. He didn't shout. He didn't look angry. He just smiled calmly, politely, but Olivia's entire body tensed as if someone had pulled a string inside her. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Olivia nodded too quickly. "Yes, we were just talking." He held out his hand for her. "Come inside. We have things to discuss." She stood up without hesitation. I saw her fingers shaking as she placed her hand in his. They walked back toward the house. But just before she stepped inside, Olivia looked back at me, not with fear, with a message. A message her lips didn't say, but her eyes did. "There is something I haven't told you yet. Something deeper, something darker, something she was too scared to reveal." And I knew then the note was only the beginning of the truth. After seeing the fear in Olivia's eyes that day in the garden, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. Something inside me hardened. I wasn't just a father anymore. I became a man who needed to protect his only child. I decided to return to the mansion one last time, but this time not as a polite visitor. I went with a purpose, to find the truth. Olivia was too scared to speak. I arrived early in the morning, when the house was still quiet. The gates were open for staff deliveries, so I walked in without anyone noticing. I moved through the hallway, passing the cameras, passing the rooms, until I reached the place I had never been allowed to enter before, Ethan's private study. The door was unlocked. Inside, the room looked like it belonged to someone who needed control to survive. Papers perfectly stacked, pens lined up by color, cabinets labeled neatly, but on one of the shelves, something didn't match: a small metal box with no label. I opened it. Inside were documents, dozens of them, contracts, schedules, reports, and a folder with Olivia's name on it. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were records of her daily movements, times she woke up, times she slept, notes about who she spoke to, copies of her messages, photos of her entering stores, leaving work, even visiting my house. It wasn't love. It was surveillance. Every detail of her life was mapped, studied, controlled. At the bottom of the folder was a list titled Behavior Adjustments. It included things like reduce contact with father, remove old friends, decrease independent decisions, increase supervision. I felt sick. My daughter wasn't living in a marriage. She was living in a system built to break her. And then I heard its footsteps. I turned around quickly, expecting Ethan, but instead I saw Mrs. Gray. She closed the door behind her quietly. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Harris," she said softly. "Why is he doing this to her?" I demanded. She looked at me with an expression that wasn't cruel, but sad. "Ethan believes love must be managed. He grew up watching his parents fall apart. He thinks freedom destroys relationships. He thinks control keeps them safe." "That's not love," I said. "I know," she whispered. "But Olivia can't leave. Not unless someone helps her." There was something in her voice, something human, something tired, and then she stepped aside. "She's in the library," Mrs. Gray said. "Go to her." I didn't waste a second. I rushed down the hallway and found Olivia sitting alone, holding her phone like it was something dangerous. When she saw me, her face broke not with fear this time, but with relief. "Dad, you found out," she whispered. "I did," I said, kneeling beside her. "And you're coming home with me." She looked toward the door, terrified. "He'll come after us." "Not today," I said. "Not anymore." For the first time in months, Olivia stood without shaking. She walked beside me, out of the mansion, out of the gates, out of the world Ethan built to trap her. When we reached my car, she held onto my arm tightly. "Dad, thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," I said. "You just need to breathe again." And as we drove away, I saw Olivia close her eyes, not in fear, but in freedom. The note she slipped into my pocket wasn't just a cry for help. It was the beginning of her escape. Her life finally belonged to her again. After everything that happened, life finally became peaceful again. Olivia moved back home, and each day she grew a little stronger. The fear in her eyes slowly disappeared. She laughed more, slept better, and started rebuilding her dreams one step at a time. I watched her become herself again, not the girl trapped in someone else's rules, but the brave woman she truly was. Ethan's control fell apart once the truth came out. His power, his image, everything he used to hold on to slipped away. And for the first time, Olivia felt free. One evening she whispered, "Dad, thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled and said, "You saved yourself. I just stood beside you." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting revenge stories.